Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The Spa and Spa Life, the SPA, is for seek power always, that power within you to do your deeper work in the world. I am so excited to introduce my special guest today, Shameca Tankerson. She is known for her brilliance and badassness. She is a shameless high achiever with a drive to help others reach their full potential in life and business, an expert on sales leadership and defeating doubt, an award-winning business coach, international best-selling author, and motivational powerhouse whose features include Forbes, ABC, CNN, and CBS. Shameca, welcome to the show.
Diane, I'm so excited to be here.
This is so fun. You know, you and I have known each other through years, through networking. We've done some social things going to help represent our chapter in a lot of different ways. And I just always so appreciate, in some ways, if someone sees you off to afar, that you can see like maybe you're shy, but yet you can always tell that you have like this inner fire within you. And one of the things I definitely want to touch on today is that you talk about your business as your activism and that your success as a rebellion. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on right now in our world. And, you know, I know for me, one of the biggest things was like not knowing what I should be doing. What's the right thing to do? What's the right thing to say? How do I show up in the world right now? Do I totally pivot what I'm doing and focus everything on the pandemic? Do I totally pivot everything I'm doing and focus everything on uprising, civil rights, and all of those things? And I found myself sitting in silence for days, not knowing what to do. And I woke up one morning realizing that I'm already being an activist and my business is my activism. I believe that money in the hands of good people will change everything. That's how change will come.
Right. Absolutely. And, you know, I'd love to have you talk a little bit so people know more about you, just your journey, because you have gone through, several waves of being, successful, six-figure income. You've had, things crash and losing it all from the house and cars to then being successful again. I'd love for you to share some of your insights and what that journey was like and what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough journey, but I think it was mostly an inward journey. So, a few years ago, probably about a decade ago, I did have a really successful business and I did lose everything. And who I was tied into the things, was tied into showing people how successful I could be. So it was tied into the house, it was tied into the cars, it was tied into whatever I can show to prove people, right? It was tied into my degrees, all of those things. And then so having all of that taken away when the market crashed back in 2008, 2009, I was left with just myself. And there was an extreme amount of shame because I had worked so hard to that point in my life to accomplish and to achieve. And then it was just all gone like that. And so the journey of learning to trust myself again, the journey of learning that I was not broken or less valuable because of all my setbacks, failures, and disappointments. But in fact, because of that journey, I actually possess more value. That those setbacks, those disappointments, those failures actually have grown me into the leader that I've become today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it's relatable because one of the things I love, I social media stalk you about all the different things that you put out. And one of the things I so appreciate is that you speak to the successful, accomplished woman, the one who everything looks great on the outside. And I speak to this a bit with my clients because of my undercover work of the ways that we live undercover in our own life. And you really speak to that of when people have those things that are deep within them that they don't share or they hold back or they're afraid or there's certain things that are happening. How is it that you speak to that about knowing that you can do better? Like you can expand better. No matter where you are now, there's always another level.
Yeah. So one of the things that I had to do for myself, and I didn't know this at the time, but in hindsight, going back and looking at it, was give myself permission to be successful again, give myself permission to be my whole self. And so when I go back to that time where I was trying to figure out how to come from the ashes or rise from the ashes of losing everything, one of the things that I did when I look back is I wrote myself 3 permission slips. And this was at a time where I was sitting in the welfare office after having multiple 6 figures, me, the person with multiple degrees. I needed to feed my kids. And so this was the thing that I had to do. And there was a lot of shame around that. And so sitting around looking in that office, feeling like, you're not supposed to be here. I remember sort of audibly hearing this voice saying, Shameca, get up, like, fight. This is not the end. This is not how your story ends. And so when I look back at that time, the 3 permission slips that I share with my clients, the first one is permission to trust your value. And I kind of just alluded to that a bit. And I like to use the illustration of, if I had $100 bill, how much is the $100 bill worth? $100, right?
It's a trick question.
No. And if I were to ball it up and throw it on the ground and even rip it a little bit, how much would it be worth?
Still $100.
$100. And so really anchoring into myself and anchoring even with the clients and the women that I speak to, that your value doesn't change. You are still just as valuable, if not more, because of everything you've gone through. And that's where the fraud factor creeps in, because people call it, what do they call it? The fraud factor, they call it, can't think of what imposter syndrome.
Right.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it.
Right. Fake it till you make it. That stuff kind of creeps in because we've been with ourselves on this journey. So the outside world doesn't know the mistakes you've made. You do. You've been with yourself all the time. So it's kind of a journey of owning the value and trusting the value that you bring to the table and trusting yourself again, right? Trusting yourself. The second permission slip that I have my clients write, or that I had to write to myself, was permission to own my expert status. Own my expert status. I believe that we're all experts. We're all an unrepeatable miracle. There's no one that can do what I do like I do, Diane, and there's no one who can do what you do like you do. And I also believe that there are people to whom we are the answer to their prayers, and it's a divine assignment. They're just waiting on you to stand up so that they can see you, so they can hear your frequency, the frequency of your voice, the resonance that you are their person. And so the person who really drove this home for me is a boxer. And so I always ask people, I'm going to ask you, Diane, yes, who is the greatest boxer of all time?
Muhammad Ali.
Right. 5-year-old.
Like a bee.
Yes. 5-year-olds, 70-year-olds, all across America, all across the world. When I travel the world, I always ask this question of even my Uber drivers, because I want to test it. They all say Muhammad Ali. Now, here's the cool thing about Muhammad Ali. Who said he was the greatest?
He did. I'm the greatest.
Yes, he did. And in fact, he was quoted as saying, I said I was the greatest before I ever was. I said I was the greatest before I ever was. If I was, and if we are to pull ourselves up or accomplish and transcend who we are currently being to get to our next level, the first person that we must sell or convince or acknowledge that with our greatness with is ourselves. The world will follow suit. So trusting your expert status or owning your expert status. And my last permission slip was permission to stop hiding in plain sight. Shame had me hiding. Shame of losing everything. Shame that I was going to be found out, that I was unable to maintain a successful business, kept me operating beneath what I believe are the promises of God for my life, kept me hiding in the shadows and lurking instead of proudly saying, I am here to support a certain woman to be successful in business. And I believe so many people do that. We whisper in the marketplace. Right. We have cards and things for businesses, but we're not like owning the fact that we are badass and brilliant.
Right. Now, Shameca, this is like easier said than done. I mean, I think everyone, no matter what your success level has, have had those times where you've doubted yourself, or who am I to step out in this arena, or what does this look like? How do you battle that, what they say, the enemy between the ears of the mindset of telling you you're not that, and overcoming that to step into that brilliance?
Yeah. So there's two things. One I want to share is I believe that this whole process takes courage, right? I'm often saying that your results and creating results and that next level that you want to get to, it doesn't take time necessarily. What it takes is you to be even more courageous than you've ever been in your entire life. So I play a game with myself, and I do this thing called courage experiences, because I believe that every new level, it's going to call you to a different version of yourself, a more expansive version of yourself. And that's unknown. And that can be scary because we don't know what it's going to look like. And so I also believe that fear, right? That fear that comes up when you're going to speak out and say something, that fear that comes up when you're going to go after a bigger client, that fear that comes out when you're going to change your life and transition into something different, is the same fear that comes up when you see a spider. Right? It originates in the same place of the body. It's not different. And so what I learned to do is to do what I call courage experiences. I do things outside of my business, outside of my regular day-to-day living, that require me to work this courage muscle, because I believe that courage is a muscle as well. It requires me to work this muscle. So I've done skydiving. I have done a 13-mile Tough Mudder. I do CrossFit on a regular basis. And what happens and what I've learned is this skill set of transcending fear is transferable to any part of your business. You just have to learn how to work the muscle, right? And so it's kind of fun to do this. But what happens is when you come up against something where it's time for you to make a change, or time for you to trust yourself when you haven't trusted yourself in the past, what happens because of these experiences is your body, your brain, your soul goes, we remember how to do this. My soul remembers how to transcend fear. My soul remembers what we felt like 13,000 feet above the air at the edge of the plane right before we dropped. And if I can do that, I can do anything. And so it's this consistently practicing of putting myself in situations where I do have to trust myself, where I have to trust my knowing, and where I get to work that courage muscle.
Yes, I love that, because one of the things I love the distinction between is knowledge, which you are brilliant women with lots of degrees, and, and then you're knowing, right? Where you can have all that information and all the degrees, but then it does come down to trusting your gut, and, whether it's spiritual whispers or whatever really motivates you. One of the things I love about the examples that you're, using in these courage experiences is that it all involves moving your body. Like, we tell people to take action, right? And what does that mean? A lot of times that is only associated with the work that we do. However, when you move your body, you actually are moving forward. You're moving in a lot of different directions. And when you move your body, it then starts aligning what's happening in your head and in your spirit and your emotions, and all of those things start lining up. So I love that you utilize your body to give yourself experiences that basically turn everything else on to move forward.
Absolutely. I think it's fun too, because we're playing with like the reticular activating system. We're playing with our brains. Yes. And reminding ourselves. And I think that memory gets stored in our cells and our DNA as well. So I think it's important to move your body with anything, any decision you make, any goal you give yourself. It can't just reside in your head. At some point, your body has to move. The action has to align with the desire. So I think it's super important.
Yeah, definitely. So some people may not know that you are the creator of the authority selling method. And this is a powerful yet simple system for having conversations and making offers that serve and sell, and that you are the go-to woman when you want to learn how to sell more. And then you just say, period.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about this system. And I love that it's about having conversations. I mean, there's a greater conversations that are happening in the world, and it does come down to that. What are the conversations that we're having one-on-one with different people? Tell us a little bit how you created this system and how you're using it today.
Yeah, I believe that sales is the energy of trust and commitment, and trust and commitment can only happen through connection.
Yes.
Right. It happens through connection. The more you connect with people, the more you trust them. The more that you're connecting with people, you're showing them that you're committed to being with them along the way. And so what I believe about selling is, one, it's an inside game. And two, it is a part of everything that you do with people, every conversation, every interaction, not just a sales conversation and a sales call. And I think with selling gets a bad rap. And most people only focus on when someone gets on the phone, what are the things I should say to sell them? But in fact, every interaction you have with someone should be sprinkled with this inside game piece of who you be, right? And your authentic communication with someone to build that connection and that trust. That is always selling. It's always, always, always selling. And what I found is that more often than not, most people who struggle with selling, it is the trust of themselves that they lack. It has nothing to do with their fear of selling. They're afraid of being rejected. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. They're afraid of turning people off. And that comes from self-alignment. That comes from not trusting your own intentions, not trusting your own wisdom. And so in the authority selling method, what I do is I show people how to, in their interactions with people, whether it's verbally or on social media, all the way through that conversation with people, how to intertwine this, have an intersection of this trust, commitment, and connection.
Can you speak a little bit more into, you talked about who you be. So can you talk about how that aspect of it, aligning with these conversations, you're known for straight talk. How do you put all those pieces together?
Yeah. So I talked about this a little bit earlier when I talked about the resonance of your voice, right? I think the people that are meant to buy from us, I'm going to do a nod to Grey's Anatomy, right? We're their person. And they know it.
I love that. You're my person.
They can sense it. But if you don't show up as yourself, they don't sense it.
Yes.
It's important for you to be who you are by design, by divine design. It's important for you not to send your representative to social media or to a podcast interview or to the representative is the person you think you should be. It's the news anchor voice and I'm going to raise my voice a couple of octaves so I can look professional. What happens is the people who you are their person, to whom you are the answer to their prayers, when you do that, you go right over their heads. Because there's no resonance.
Is that where you can actually say all the right words, but it's still not connecting?
You can read a script, you can say all the right words, you can post all the right things, and people just don't get it because it doesn't connect to the people it's supposed to connect to. So who you be is the most important aspect of this. And it's not just about being your authentic self. It's about owning all the pieces of you, the broken and the healed, right? The disenfranchised and the excited, the wounded and the warrior, right? It's every bit of who you be and not being ashamed to allow the fullness of that to be present as you market your business, as you try to have a relationship, all of that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And, I know too that you consciously create your day. Like it's very intentional about what you do. And I'd love for you to share a little bit about your morning ritual when you talk about putting on all of yourself.
Yes. I call it putting on your whole self or your power self. And so I don't start my day until my whole self is on.
How do you know when your whole self is not on?
Well, you can tell. Well, I can tell. So this has come from practice. And I used to try to just push through and work even when my whole self wasn't present. And so this is how you know. Okay. What I do in the morning is probably not like what most people do. I don't really have a morning routine. Okay. What I do is I'm checking in with my body, my mind, my soul, my spirit. I'm checking in to the physical as well as the emotional and the mental and saying, Shameca, what is it that you need today? What is it that you need today? So my ritual could last as long as 2 hours. I give myself that much space. And what I do is I do whatever I need. So if I need to fuel my body, which means feed myself, I do. Most mornings I don't eat. I typically don't eat till about 1 p.m. But there are mornings where I wake up and my body's like, no, eat food. And so I do. So I'm listening. If I need to move my body, I move my body. And I do that in a variety of ways. It can be, I do something called Ramwad, which is like yoga and it's stretching. So I could do that. I can literally exercise if I need to. But oftentimes my movement is a dance party in the shower.
To what song?
I have a playlist, right, of all these power songs that I just collect. So it could be anywhere from This Is Me to, I don't know, This Girl Is on Fire. Like, it doesn't, it could be anything. And so, and it could be, 5-10 minutes of a dance party. I actually own an in-shower Bluetooth speaker.
Me too.
Yes.
Sometimes, in fact, last night I was like hitting like, no. Like sometimes they don't resonate.
Yeah. So that's been one of the greatest gifts to me, is like being able to literally dance in the shower and actually hear the music. Yes. Is amazing. And what I'm looking for is this sense of like, yeah, you're ready for your day. If I need to do mindset readjustments, like listening to binarials or affirmations, I will do that as well as I listen to my future. So I've recorded the goals that I plan to accomplish in the next 12 months. And I listen to them 3 times a day. And the morning is one of the times when I do that as well. So I've recorded my own voice saying, this is what my life is like now. And I'm just reprogramming my brain to say, hey, this is what we're creating, so that it's in alignment with me.
Right. I love that you use that tactic, because it's one of those things that elite athletes use, right? They watch tapes over and over again of their perfect moves. And so they can go in that groove and they can always tag into that. And, a lot of entrepreneurs talk about that, but they don't always implement it. And, it's great for the listeners to hear that's something that you listen to 3 times a day, right? I think, what is it, like 70,000 negative imprints just by being are honest, like every single day. And if we don't do those things that counter those negative thoughts, whether it's, how you were raised, how your community is, whatever those things are, we have to do things that negate those, that actually put us on track to do the things that we want to do.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm glad you said that, because I do plan to listen 3 times a day, but if I have a negative moment, I go grab it. And I'm like, nope, pattern interrupt. We're going to listen to this. Yeah, stop it.
Oh, good. Oh, I love that. And, I love that you allow yourself the flexibility in the morning to check in with yourself to see, do I need more things with movement? Do I need to have more quiet time? Do I need to eat? Like asking yourself all these questions to fuel yourself first, because so many times people get to that place of exhaustion. I mean, anyone who's built anything, there are those days and nights where it just feels like it's endless. And if we don't give ourselves, those breaks and those things that build ourselves up, we don't have the energy and power to be able to serve and help other people. And you talk about that you don't just check the box on those things. And one of the things that you and I have talked about this before, and I would love just for the listeners, even with things that are happening in the world, that there's a lot of people who are like, oh, I need to shift how I'm doing. Let me just check that box. Like it's just a one and done. And you've spoke a lot about the long game, about how the conversations you have about it not being checking the box, and how you can see what you're doing on a daily basis actually elevates who you are and what kind of impact you want to have and the type of relationships that you're doing. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, it's easy when things are popular to just like, oh, I'm going to do this. And this is what happens when people go to like events and learn. It's the same symptom.
Right.
It's the same process of, I'm very excited because this is a now thing. And then you go home and you've got all these, I'm looking at all my binders over here. You got all these binders. You got all these binders and maybe, 1% implementation or 2 or 3% implementation. And I think we're in a time right now where we're seeing our world change before our very eyes. Like we're about to go into a season with the introduction of COVID-19 into our world. Like our world is different. People are wearing masks everywhere. It's not the same with what we have going on with the race conversation right now. Things are different. It's not the same. And so if we believe that we're just going to like very quickly do the thing that we always do, and let's talk about the race conversation, right? There are hard conversations that must be had. And there are many people who are willing to look, to expand, to learn, and we're all learning, right? We're all learning and unlearning things. This is not something that you can just check a box and do. It's not something that you can just say, I'm going to do it this week and oh, I hope in a week it's all said and done. I believe that we are in a season of expansion. I believe that 2020 is the year of the great revelation. Everybody thought it was about 2020 vision. Nope. It's showing us, it's revealing who we are. It's revealing the truth of who we are as individuals and as a collective. And this has to be a commitment to the long game. It may not even happen in our lifetime that we see the fruits of everything that we're like popping the lid off of right now. But if we're all committed to like not racing out and trying to read all the books right now, and not racing out and trying to have all the conversations right now, because the other thing is those conversations are difficult conversations. They are hard conversations. And because the conversations are hard, they're raw. You can't sit in that for too long before it begins to affect you. So it's important for us to have a sense of normalcy. Mm-hmm. It's important for us to fuel ourselves, because you can't give you, sometimes you might have to pull back, refuel, and come back to it. It's a long game. It's
right.
Not a short game. I don't know if did you run track, Diane, in high school or college?
Actually, the first time I did long distance running or training was in the police academy.
Okay.
And I was always last because I was a single mom at the time. And that was a whole new world for me.
So you'll probably understand this too. Like in the beginning of a long race, you may think that you can just come hot and heavy and just take off. And before you know it, you're tuckered out, right? Everybody's still going and you're like, wait, I'm dying. And then you learn, right? You learn that slow and steady, you can last till the end. And you might even be able to keep up with everyone else, right? Not too far behind. And I think for me, as I look at where we are right now in society, this is what it's going to take. We're not going to solve all the problems of the world today, right? But if we are committed to the long game, we'll get there.
Right. I love that. And, I love that you pick out a lot of the nuances. You've spoke a lot to, like, if someone's like looking for just any Black person to speak on a certain topic, but yet it's not their area of expertise. It's one of those checking the boxes, like finding somebody who actually knows what they're talking about. Like I've had Trudy LeBron on the show. Like she's really opened my eyes to a lot of, that's her strength. That's like what she does. I know a lot of times right now, a lot of people don't know I'm a retired San Diego police officer. I did that for 10 years. I did patrol and undercover. And it can be really challenging because I know that there's a lot of officers that go out and do the best they can and do it in as best as the situations that present them. Now, do we see like I think in any job where there's people where it's like, how did they come up with that? Like, how did you make those decision processes? And you see some of these things that unravel over time. So, I have got people who are talking to me because of my background of, how does this happen and what can you do about it? And what is it about training? And one of the things that, Carrie and I are committed to, because he was on the department for 30 years, is we're actually part of a group that's helping train in de-escalation training across the country. We were actually got to have some really good training in San Diego, but also understanding there's a company called BioSync about having training in law enforcement agencies so that they can actually recognize areas that they don't even know that they're making decisions from their background. So really looking at what that is. Right. And I've learned a lot of things in just listening to some of your lives and other people. I mean, I'm somebody who has a master's degree and I consider myself an educated woman. But I hadn't until I heard some of the things you talked about. Is I had never heard of Black Wall Street. I didn't know about what had happened back in Tulsa. Like I was not aware of some of those things. And so I'm listening to some of my friends of where can I educate myself on things where I wouldn't have even known to look before, and to start asking some deeper questions around how can I have better questions and be in an uncomfortable spot of not knowing. And a lot of people saying, well, I don't know what to do. What are some of the things that you're sharing with people so they don't just check the box and go, okay, I'm done with that, how they can make some lasting changes? What are you speaking to those that maybe this is a new conversation?
I think for me, the biggest thing is what you said earlier about getting with a diversity and inclusion racism expert, because even though I'm Black, I'm not an expert. right? Even though I know my lived experience and I can share with you my stories and what I would like to see as a human being, like the way I want to be treated, I don't have the tools and the skills to share with you. And I'm saying but this is why you don't want to just pick a Black person to come speak about diversity and inclusion. Right. I don't have the skills to show you or tell you, and I may not even have the education. Now, fortunately, I do, because I've learned. I even studied in school. You know, I can hang with the best of them when it comes to racism, inequality, and those things. But most people, even Black people, don't even know the history of Tulsa. Like, I just shared it in my community last night, and a lot of people, Black and white, inside of my community were like, I've never heard of that. And I'm like, I've known about it pretty much all my life, from the time I was about 13 years old. And so understanding that there would be huge gaps in just having somebody come and talk from their lived experience. But I think you can do that, but it has to be clear, like, this isn't the only answer or the only way, and it may not be the way that you necessarily need to go. The second reason why I said, you know, let's not just check boxes and do what I call performance activism, which is grab the first Black person you see and have them speak.
Right.
Let's just be honest, right? It's like, okay, let's get some diversity in here. That's code for Black person, or person of color. I don't believe we should do that, because it actually can do more harm than good. As a Black person, you asking me questions about what I've been through means I have to relive that experience. Mm-hmm. I have to relive trauma. I have to go back to the space where this happened to me and relive it. And there are a lot of us who don't have the skill sets to pull ourselves out of that. So you're opening up anger, you're opening up hurt, you're opening up trauma, all of those things. And then they just need to be at your networking event smiling afterwards. It's not a good place to be in. Now, these trained experts, they know what to do and they have the tools. They've learned how to be in this space without that. So that's my suggestion, is to get help from someone who's trained in helping you understand what to do next. The next thing that I would say, and this is my last thing about this, be a decent freaking human.
Why does that seem so hard?
Yeah, well, you know, sometimes we're so thinking about checking the box that we're forgetting humanity, right?
Yes.
We're forgetting humanity. Like, think about it. If you were raped, would you want people asking you over and over again to tell them, well, tell me how it happened. Tell me what you were wearing. Tell me now, did you do anything or say anything that would make them do that to you? Like, put it in that perspective.
Right, right.
And that's what's happening. So let's just be decent human beings.
Yeah. It's funny that kind of triggered for me. I was the only woman on my squad. And a lot of times when, rape calls, they were called 261 calls. And they would always try and look for a female officer, because of course I would be the only one to relate to her experience, versus them having that kind of dialogue with another human being. And so it's interesting where people will make these assumptions when it's like, do your job. Be a person, be there for somebody, and, show them that there can actually be a decent male person that actually cares about what happened to them, that they're not looking just to pass them off because there's a female officer that's available. So I love that. Just kind of looking a little bit, what would you want to have happen to yourself? If you were having a conversation with yourself, how would you want someone to speak to you? What would you want them to ask? What would that actually look like? And part of what is great about having some of these conversations is looking at what is the journey of that person. And that was actually one of the things that I love for you to share more about. Is we talk about things that have been disempowering for us, things that we've personally experienced for that, and how we move through that to then now stand in our power and have it look differently. Mm-hmm. And I know for you, I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you were showing up even differently in how you dressed and how you showed up as a business person. Can you talk a little bit about that journey?
Yeah. And what's funny, when I wrote that down, Diane, I didn't even think how much that pertains to like the race conversation.
All right, put that together for our people.
Yeah. So I thought there was a way that I had to show up and appear to be palatable, to look professional, and to be accepted in different places and different levels of society, different places where I've worked. And so there was a point in time in my life where I used to wear, navy suits and a string of pearls. It was Can you imagine me?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. Navy suits, a string of pearls. And I know that when I walk into a room, people are like, who is this purple haired, Afro wearing, all the colors that I wear?
I love that about you because I love purple. Of course, I've got purple everywhere.
But it wasn't always that way. And I just had to come home to the truth of who I was. And I will say this, I struggled rebuilding my business for as long as I held on to that as a truth, that I needed to show up a certain way to be palatable to other people.
Okay, wait a minute. I know sometimes people who are listening to the show, they're driving and there's a distraction. I think this is a really important point. I would love for you to say that again.
Yeah, I was just sharing that I struggled for a long time in my business because of this, because of not being who I was 100%, because I was trying to be palatable to people who didn't like me and weren't going to buy from me anyway. Let's be honest, right? I was trying to please people who weren't my people. And the moment I began to show up as myself, right? I let my hair grow out. I stopped wearing weaves and wigs. I start wearing all these bold colors and animal prints and the most incredible, amazing shoes that I love. I ditched the pearls. I wear my back stud earrings. I have, I wear crazy stuff.
Now, was there an incident that you just said, wait a minute, I'm not in alignment, or was that something that kind of trickled over time? How did you come to that awareness?
Honestly, I think it was just peeling the layers of the onion, being committed to the work of unveiling who I am and the work that I wanted to do in the world to impact and to change lives. The only way that happens is when you're being truthful about what you desire and who you be.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that is so powerful. I love that. It reminds me, one of the things I love to ask my guests on the show is about your personal environment, because that also is an expression of who you are. I mean, I noticed, not only in your branding, but who you are. I'm always looking at, like a boss and the different things that you have behind you. And, that also, those are positive things that are in your environment that you look at, that you see every day. And so we have different experiences in our office versus our bedroom or our kitchen. What is your favorite room in your home and why?
My favorite room in my home. I think my favorite room in my home is like this little nook that I have in my living room. It's got a big comfy chair. I like comfortable stuff. So there's a big comfy armchair and it sits in a corner, and there's windows because I like light and to see things. I like openness and expansiveness. Mm-hmm. There's windows that you can see outside or inside, and it lets a lot of light in. And then all around me is just like musical stuff. So that room, my living room, has more like guitars and cellos on the walls and musical notes on the wall. And there's this big plaque that says love. And then I have a little dice that sits on a little armoire that I have down there. And if you roll it, it says all kinds of things, but it's usually sitting up on sing. And it just reminds me of my safe space. Music has always been a huge part of my life.
Do you play an instrument?
I don't. I sing. Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone else in your family? I mean,
my entire family does. Yeah.
You have a
my husband
band.
plays multiple instruments. There's guitars everywhere in my house, and yeah, they're everywhere.
What kind of music do you sing?
So I sing at church most often, but I sing all kinds of music. I mean, I'm classically trained as well as, contemporarily trained. I used to be a voice teacher. So in that space between losing my business and trying to build this one, I got to the point where it was like, Shameca, you need to take care of you. Like, what do you need to do so that you can still do your nails and still do your hair and still feel amazing about yourself? So I started teaching voice. And I did that for a number of years, tangent to rebuilding my business, just so I can keep like my basic level of self-care up. Yeah. And so, yeah, I taught voice for a number of years.
Isn't it interesting about how we're talking about, using your voice and being yourself, and that's actually an aspect of you and who you are. And, one of the things that you share a lot about is that everything you need is already within you. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I said this earlier, that each one of us, you're an unrepeatable miracle. Like, there's an essence to who you be that cannot be duplicated at all. It will never be duplicated for the ends of time, and it hasn't existed except for in this time.
Yes.
And I believe that while we may need to hone skills or learn certain things, the thing that actually will make you the most successful, you already possess. And it's just about tuning into what that is and trusting that it's valuable enough, right? And that you are worthy as you are, and there's nothing else you need to pile onto that. And I think once people come into that knowing, anything's possible. I'm not broken. I'm not wounded. There's nothing that needs to be fixed, even in all my quirkiness, the fun things about me, the not so cool things that people don't really like about me, the things I do that irk people. It's all a part of this tapestry of who you are, this essence of your soul. And that's where your magic lies. That's where your power resides. Like, that's everything. When you own that, anything is possible.
I love that so much. And this is such an important like lesson and just guidepost that I love to have on this show is, where are you finding your power? Because, it's not that you never had it. You maybe misplaced it or you didn't see it or whatever, and life, unfolded however it did for you. But those moments of when you rediscover that and you can actually own it and be in that,
Yes.
that's what we need to have more, reflections of, more leadership, really showing that who you are is enough. It is such an important thing to talk about. And because I'm so fascinated with so many things about you, I think I squirreled a little bit about your musical talents, but just going back for a second to your sanctuary of your space, one of the reasons I like to ask that is because who we are as a person gets reflected in our space, and what's in our space gets reflected in who we are. And so I love the picture of the brightness and the light and the things that bring you joy and the comfortability. I mean, these are intentional things that you've created in your space. And I love for our listeners to hear this because I don't know about you, but a lot of times with some of my clients, when things aren't working well, in their life or who they are as a person, a lot of times what's happening in their space isn't working. And, it's kind of like the chicken and egg, is it the environment or is it the person? But these things work, back and forth with each other, that if we change some things in our environment, we can change and evolve as a person. And when we do things to evolve in ourselves, we want things in our space that continue to lift us up. Have you seen some of that correlation?
Absolutely. I think there's two spaces that we should look at, like our immediate environment, which is where we live and where we house things, right? I think that's really important. Like for me, sometimes if I'm in creation mode, I do a lot of like writing notes and posting things up, that I have to clean that out when it's time for me to expand. Like I know when my brain is cluttered, my desk is cluttered.
Yes.
Right? It does come out. The other space, the other section of that is community. Right? Your community is an environment that's super important. Is that community reflecting back to you your greatness, your power, your prowess? Or is that community making you feel small? Right? Reflecting back to you that you're not enough, even unknowingly. Right? If you get inside of a community and you're always feeling like you need to do more, know more in order to fit in or even stay in that space, it's probably not the best environment for you.
Absolutely. They say about all boats rising, right? That who are the people that you're spending your time with and what those reflections, look like. I know for me, when I retired from the police department, I felt exhausted. I mean, not only was I involved in, a notorious case where I actually knew that a child who had been killed. But in that time, I believe that part of the healing process is I created an online academy and a course called Clutter to Calm. And it was all about, I had to shift everything in my space, from the people to my things to all the things, so that I could see things from a different perspective and really shift those things, not only for myself, but for people that I worked with. And I think it's so important to continue to evaluate, am I in situations, are my friends or people that we lift each other up? Or are there people that you surround yourself where you're tearing yourself or other people down? Right. And those are choices, right, of who we are spending our time with. Because, time is such a precious resource that we have, and to spend it wisely and intentionally and really look at that from a much more clear perspective is really important. You also talk about exponential transformation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I have a process, or I don't believe it's my process. I think embodiment is an important space to get to if you want to transcend all that you are right now and become who you desire to be. And that includes your goals, whether it's sales goals or what you want to do in life, the legacy that you want to live. And most people reside in this space of knowledge. Knowledge isn't transformation, and knowledge does not allow you to exponentially expand. So there's knowledge. And once you have knowledge, if you do something with it, what you experience is transformation, right? And from that transformation, when you're in that space of transformation over and over and over again until it becomes like your new normal or a habit, that's where you're in embodiment. And this is the space where exponential transformation, exponential expansion can happen. It's almost like you're collapsing time. People used to call it quantum leaping. They probably still do, in that embodiment. And when I ask people, do you know what embodiment really means? I'm like, there's a couple of things that you've embodied. I want you to get this understanding. You'll know when you've embodied it, because there's two things for sure that you've embodied. The first one is walking, and the second one is breathing. You don't have to think about it. You just do it. You don't have to go, I am going to walk now. It is just a part of who you be and how you move in the world. And when you pull yourself into the space of embodiment, that's when you begin to collapse time. That's when you begin to accelerate learning and becoming that next level version of yourself. And then you start the process all over again at the next level. Transformation, information or knowledge, transformation, and then embodiment.
Well, you embody beauty and grace, my friend. This has just been so wonderful to spend this time here with you. And I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you. And I'd love for you to share how they can do that and any final words for our listeners.
Yeah. So I hang out on Facebook most of the time. So I'll just say that if you just follow Shameca Tankerson on Facebook, and I know, Diane, you're probably going to put something around.
Everything will be in the links.
Yeah, they'll be able to connect with me there. If you would love to learn more about the stuff I'm talking about expansion and collapsing time and moving from information to transformation, because I'm information into embodiment, because I'm all about helping women transcend with anything they've ever known or seen before in their lives and creating entirely new legacies, especially around wealth for generations to come. And so what I have is a show called the Raise Your Game Show that I do every Tuesday. And I'm like trying to remember the link that I gave you guys to follow. Oh, it's the Raise Your Game Show.
Simplicity.
Cracking myself up. I'm like, what did I say? RaiseYourGameShow.com. You can follow me over there. It's going to take you into my Facebook Messenger, and it's going to allow you to be able to get reminded about the show that we do every Tuesday.
Wonderful. I love it. Love it. And any parting words of wisdom?
I think the main thing that I want to say in all of this is, no matter where you are, we've woven a lot of conversations in here. I just want to leave you with this. You're not broken. You're an exceptional being. You were born for such a time as this, and you got this.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your journey and sharing your time with us here today.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, we want to thank you for spending your time here with us. You could be in many places, and time is our most precious resource. We so appreciate you being here. And, especially in these times where we're doing a lot more working from home, being from home, learning from home, please share this, get this out, subscribe to the show, share it with your friends. Maybe there's one thing in here that is the message that they needed to hear. You can be that person to get it out. If you have any questions for myself or Shameca, make sure that you tag both of us. We're happy to answer any questions, to follow up with you and help you no matter where you are in your journey. And until we connect again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.